Welcome to this GDPR webinar, brought to you by Access Recruitment as part of our Comply with Confidence series. This webinar will focus on how we can help you with GDPR. First of all, thank you for all joining. This webinar will be presented by myself, Chris Hill. I'm the Head of Product for Access Recruitment, and Andy Betts, my colleague, who's the Product Owner for Access RDB. As stated, we'll be covering GDPR in a nutshell. We'll be looking at Access RDB updates to support GDPR, and we'll be looking at the Access Consent Portal for GDPR. Following these few short slides, we'll be giving you a demonstration regarding the new features of Access RDB and also looking at the Access Consent Portal. So let's get started.
Thanks, Chris. I will now go through some of the GDPR basics as a recap on what the regulations were set out to do. This quote from Elizabeth Denham at the ICO sums up GDPR perfectly. It reminds us that we all need to rethink about how we operate as a business after May, when the regulations come into effect. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation. They come into force on the 25th of May this year. Failure to comply may result in fines of up to 20 million or 4% of your gross profit, whichever is the greatest. GDPR's main aim is to unify data protection laws across the EU and extend the jurisdiction globally. It is not aimed at recruitment specifically. AppsCo Rec and the ICO have published some really good guidelines and are a really good source of information, so I suggest everybody goes and takes a look at this really good piece of information.
I'd like to talk now about the changes that we've made to Access RDB to support GDPR. Our approach when we looked at what needed to change in RDB was to focus on consent for actions and storing that consent. If your agency wishes to rely upon legitimate interest or contract or definitions, we allow the storing of documents against client and candidate records to help track this already. Right to erasure and subject access requests are also covered. Here we can see a quick timeline of the latest releases for RDB, and we had some GDPR content in the 6.5 release, which was the tail end of last year. Version 6.6 is the consent release, and that was released in February. Version 6.7, which releases later this month, is the actions release and focuses on deletion, right to be forgotten, and process blocking. And then in July, we plan to release version 7, which is the next major version of RDB, which includes all the GDPR updates from 6.5, 6.6, and 6.7. One thing that's important to remember is we cannot handle GDPR for you, but we will make it easier for you wherever we can.
Let's have a look at version 6.6, the consent changes, in a little more detail. What we've done here is we've created some new tables in the database to store consent at a granular level. We've also added a new tab in the RDB desktop onto the applicant record to view those consents. These will be built into the browser by default. If you have purchased the Access Consent Portal for GDPR, there is also a plugin available on the store that will sync your data from your consent portal back into the tab on RDB. We've also provided a new merge field, which will enable you to send out a unique link to the candidate for the consent portal. Now let's have a look at version 6.7, the action changes. Within RDB, there will be some process blockers that will disable certain features based on consent or lack of it. For example, if a candidate has said that they do not want to be contacted by SMS, by mapping the consent type to the blocker will prevent you from sending an SMS to that candidate. If you do not wish to take advantage of the blockers, by simply not mapping the two together, RDB will continue to work as it does today. Data portability element of the GDPR regulation will also be covered in 6.7. This will generate a CSV file of all data held against the applicant, which you will then be able to email to them. Data deletion will also be added. This will remove the candidate from the active database where they have expressed their right to be forgotten. Rules around the usage of the above will also be in place.
The Access Consent Portal helps your candidates provide consent. It was launched in February and it's compatible with version 6.6 of RDB and later via a plugin. The portal can be branded via self-service tools where you can add your logo, change some colours and define the different types of consent that you would like to store. As mentioned, if you have the plugin with RDB, all consents entered into the portal are synced back into the RDB's main system and visible through the GDPR tab. Now let's take a look at some demonstrations of the changes in RDB and a quick overview of the portal.
Let's have a look at 6.6 in action. As you can currently see, I'm in the main index. So let's open up an applicant record and have a look at the GDPR tab. It's available down the bottom here along the tabs along the bottom. So if you select GDPR tab, you can currently see that this applicant hasn't given consent to anything at the moment. From this screen, you are able to add a new consent type. So let's add one in. So let's say he's given us consent to contact him by email and it's received yesterday. Expiry date you can enter if you so wish to. Save and close the record and you can now see that's just appeared on the GDPR tab. Also from this screen, you can select View History. That will give you a history of when that consent was added or removed or edited. That is 6.6 in a nutshell from an applicant perspective. Let's have a look at the System Owner screen. So under the System Owner screen, there is a new tab called GDPR. This top section is if you've bought the consent portal from Access, you will be able to enter the URL where it's hosted and the username and password of your admin account. This will be requested when you install the plugin. Once that's installed, all the consents and purposes from the consent portal will sync back into the GDPR tab on the applicant record. Now let's have a look at some of the features that are coming up in version 6.7. If we go back to the System Owner screen and go to the GDPR tab, you will see that there is a consent blocker mapping table. This enables you to map your consent types, whether it be email, SMS, phone, or anything else that you might want to enter. There is a new feature available which will allow you to enter your own consent types, or if you have purchased the consent portal, these will be pulled through and populated in this list from the consent portal. So if we have a look at send email, as you can currently see, this is mapped to the consent type of email. What this means is that if any candidate has not got that consent type of email, it will block you from sending an email. So let's have a look at that in action. So let's open up an applicant record, have a look at their GDPR tab, and as you can see, they haven't given consent to be sent something by email. So let's try and send an email to this applicant. As you can see, it's given me a warning message to say that they haven't given consent, so it's not going to let me send it. If I then go back into the applicant record, back to the GDPR tab, add the consent type of email, and received today. Save and close the record. Save and close our record again. And now let's try and send her an email. As you can see, you can now send the email to the candidate as you normally would.
This is the main screen shown after login to the consent portal. Upon registration, applicants can select the communication channels available for contact, and these can also be changed at any time. Here you can see the consent types which are configurable through the portal admin dashboard by clients. Here, applicants can subscribe to each consent type and select the relevant channel too. In this example, I can subscribe to marketing communications by email and by SMS, or I can select them individually. Any changes made here, including all consent preferences and channels, are then synced back to RDB through the plugin mentioned earlier. Those changes then appear in the GDPR tab and on the system owner screens, which we showed you in earlier demonstrations. Remember, the portal can be customised to include your logo and colour schemes, also through the self-service admin dashboard. Well, I hope you enjoyed those demonstrations. If you'd like more information, don't forget to visit our resource hub for articles, blogs and guides around GDPR. You can also view the fact sheet on the Access Consent portal for GDPR from the resource hub. If you'd like any specific information or any questions further to ask the team, please get in touch on the email addresses shown now. We hope you enjoyed the webinar and we'll speak to you again soon.